Hey guys, welcome to the show. Round the Nation, right here. Jeff Waldorf with you. Got a great show for you guys today. We will be talking about some important things, including the shooting at Thousand Oaks. Yes, we have another mass shooting here in America. You will not be surprised at what the shooter looks like. We'll talk a little bit about that, but more about what actually happened. Then we are also going to talk a little bit about the Jeff Sessions and his replacement. I know I promised you guys that story yesterday and what that means for the Mueller investigation. That's pretty important. We also have the White House literally spreading fake news. I know, big surprise, right? About Jim Acosta. Literal fake news. Oh boy. Then we also have Brian Kemp, an update on, of course, the Georgia gubernatorial race. So that is very interesting. What has been happening with that? So, okay. So that's the stuff that we are going to talk about today. A quick note. So there was a little bit of a disagreement between Farron Cousins and Kyle Kulinski, as well as Jimmy Dore. So in a recent video, Farron, who lives in Florida, he was like, "Hey," basically he was pretty mad at some of the people who were pointing out positions where Gillum wasn't necessarily progressive or hadn't really changed, or hadn't really stayed, hadn't really stuck to those positions, I guess. So where he started to de-emphasize talking about Medicare for all, etc., and he pointed that out as saying, well, it's you guys depressed the vote. And so now we're stuck with Ron DeSantis. So I want to kind of clarify my position, right? So nowhere during the campaign was I saying don't vote for Gillum. But it is important to point out where I think he did de-emphasize some of those more progressive positions. That doesn't mean don't vote for the guy. Doesn't mean don't support the guy. It just means that, hey man, look, this is his position. And I actually did wait until after the campaign was over to point out that I think he did switch that position a little bit, and not necessarily because Gillum is a terrible person or a terrible candidate. No, he's a great candidate, ran a great campaign. I think it was more of the consultants are like, hey, you can't go for Medicare for all. You can't run quite as strong as you did in the primary because we think that you'll lose to Ron DeSantis. And so, and look, I understand that happens. Consultants will get in your ear and tell you, no, this is the correct way to win. So, but what I've learned is that the consultants aren't necessarily right. Now, of course, those two don't necessarily agree with that, with each other, I should say, but they came to a more of an understanding. So it was good to see that because I respect both Farron and Kyle greatly, and I respect Jimmy as well. So, you know, it's just one of those things where it's like, I get why you're angry, but I don't necessarily agree with you, and I think that you should, you know, not listen to those consultants. You should continue to be strong and unapologetic, because I think that is the key to winning. And one of the things that might have really ruined Gillum's chance is actually more racism than anything. So that's my thought on that. There was racism, there was voter suppression, as usual. Again, it's Florida, and so I think that more than anything, I think really ruined Gillum's chances. Nonetheless, he is now considering looking at a recount. So let's hope, man. Let's hope it gets within a half a percentage point for a recount, and hopefully maybe they can start to count some of those ballots that they didn't before, with the national scrutiny on them, and maybe, just maybe, Gillum might squeeze out a win. Bill Nelson, who's a corporate Democrat. Bill Nelson, he's somebody that I don't like, but he's definitely better than Rick Scott. So Bill Nelson's actually fighting, and so okay. Good luck, and I hope he look again. As crappy as Bill Nelson is, he's much better than Rick Scott. So I hope that if he does do a recount, or if they do a recount, that he is successful in that. Because, like it or not, I mean, we deal with the Republicans now, and then later on, once we dealt with the Republicans, we go after the corporate Democrats and we replace them. So, anyway. I just wanted to weigh in on that, just because, again, I hate to see progressives fight each other over things. So, I mean, like, we all got to fight this fight together against both the far right, the Republican Party, and corporate Democrats. Okay. Anyway, here's another thing, too. So, apparently, there's a lot of protests, and I think they're unfairly characterized as defend Jeff Sessions protests, which they're not. It's more to protest the firing of Jeff Sessions, which is kind of funny when you think about it, and kind of ironic because all of us progressives, we hate Jeff Sessions, but we realize that, well, I mean, Jeff Sessions has been removed in order to have Trump shut down the Mueller investigation. So if we want to protect the Mueller investigation, then we're going to have to protest in favor of Jeff Sessions. It's kind of like we know that Sessions is horrible, but at the same time, we value our democracy, or what's left of it. So it is kind of an interesting juxtaposition that we have here, and a strange position we find ourselves in these days. But again, anything can happen, right? All right. And before I get into the actual stories of today, please give us a like and share. That helps out a lot. Sharing is really important and extremely helpful. So do that, please, if you haven't already. Got a super chat here from Rexel. Sup to you, Rex. Just doing a show. Just giving my political opinions. Doing my thing. Thank you for the super chat. That helps the show. Okay. Now let's dive in. Let's start out with fun as usual. Yeah. All right. So following the firing of Jeff Sessions, Gabriel Sherman of Vanity Fair went to go talk to some of the insiders inside the White House to get the general feeling of how President Trump and the people around him are feeling, right? So, you know, how they feel about Sessions and Matt Whitaker, who was apparently Sessions' replacement. Well, now, and of course, the question they asked, Gabriel Sherman asked, is why? Why did they get rid of Sessions in the first place? Well, I think we already know this, but let's go to their own words. Apparently, Gabriel Sherman's source says, quote, he hated Sessions. It all goes back to the recusal. Now, that's funny. Jeff Sessions was Donald Trump's first supporter back when it was risky to support Donald Trump at all. He came out there and says, oh boy, Howdy, you are saying the exact right things that I want to hear about immigration and about everything else. I will support you, President Trump. First guy, right? So he was a Trump fan. And yet, because of that original sin, recusing himself from the Russia investigation, Sessions was absolutely hated, despite the fact that he's been incredibly loyal on policy grounds. That said, getting rid of Sessions and putting in a replacement, that replacement is actually slated to be far worse on those very same issues and on something actually incredibly important. And that, of course, is the Russia investigation. Now, Sessions' replacement, right, Sherman, Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker is a conservative right out of central casting. Quote, Trump loves the guy. He's like 6'4" and played tight end for Iowa's Rose Bowl team. Before he joined the administration, Whitaker, who will assume authority over the Mueller probe from Rod Rosenstein, wrote an article saying that if the special counsel investigated Trump's finances, it would represent a red line, and has suggested that one way to curtail the investigation without firing Mueller would be to starve it of funds. So already, here we go, we have pretty much the reason that Matt Whitaker was chosen over anyone else. In fact, Sherman writes, Trump's move against Sessions yesterday arrives at a moment when Trump allies are increasingly concerned about Donald Trump Jr.'s legal exposure. Now, look, I had a story a couple of days ago where Donald Trump Jr. himself is like, I am going to get indicted. I feel like it's going to happen, and it's going to happen after the midterms. So what did Trump do? Immediately, right after the midterm election, doesn't wait a couple of weeks, says, okay, Sessions, you're out. Whitaker, you're in. Okay, so take that spot, and now you're going to do what I tell you to in something that you've telegraphed to everybody all along, and that is shut down the Mueller investigation. And that's what that is, right? Now back to Don Jr. John Jr., according to three sources, has been telling friends he's worried about being indicted as early as this week. Well, tick tock, only got a couple of days left. One person close to Don Jr. speculated that Mueller could indict him for making false statements to Congress and the FBI about whether he told his father about the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting that he used to attempt to get dirt on Russians to get dirt from the Russians on Hillary Clinton. Now, the source had heard that the case could revolve around Trump's former deputy campaign chairman, Rick Gates. Now, Rick Gates worked for Manafort. Rick Gates is cooperating with Mueller, and he was deeply involved in the campaign at the time of the meeting. Now, Trump, this person continued, is, quote, very upset about the risks that Don Jr. faces, and then added, the president is very depressed. Very, very depressed. So that is the general mood. You've got Don Jr. worrying about being indicted for being an idiot. And then you have Donald Trump himself very depressed about this. And so he's like, look, I'm going to do everything that I can to protect our asses. And that means basically setting up a constitutional crisis. Now, not only is Trump depressed about that, but he's also upset about the Democrats taking the House, which is funny because he endorsed Nancy Pelosi. But there is a reason for that. Right after that endorsement of Nancy Pelosi, you had Nancy take impeachment off the table. You had Nancy talking about, oh, let's do bipartisanship. Let's open up a vast bipartisan marketplace of ideas with Trump. Not good, right? So maybe he's feeling a little bit better now. But there is a reason that he does these things. Now, what are some of the Republicans inside the White House or close to the White House? Some of Gabriel Sherman's sources. What are they saying about this? Well, apparently about the House being taken over by Democrats, Trump is thinking about it two ways. Number one, and this is in regards to some of the investigations that Democrats might actually think about doing. Number one, they said, what could they release about me? And number two, how does it work politically for me? Well, now that's fascinating. So any investigation that might come as a result of Democrats having the House, Trump's already thinking about how can I twist that to my advantage and make it seem like I'm a victim of a Democrat witch hunt, etc. Now he's really, really good at playing the victim. So not only that, but inside the White House, Sherman notes There is a debate about how to deal with Democrats controlling the House. Some advisors fear the White House is not set up to defend itself against the onslaught of hearings. In fact, a former West Wing official had said, quote, "I'll be very concerned about the House investigations." And one Republican close to the president told Sherman, quote, "I think everyone is worried. Everyone except for Donald Trump." Now, is Trump worried about the investigations themselves? Well, I just told you. He's trying to figure out how to use those investigations to his advantage. So is he necessarily worried about them? No, I don't think so. Not as much anyway as he's worried about Don Jr. and as worried about the, of course, Mueller probe. Now, that means, of course, since he's worried, he has taken steps. So what steps is Whitaker going to take? Well, I think we already know. He's going to find some way to shut down the Mueller investigation. Now, will he do it outright? Or will he do it by starving it of resources and funds? I don't know. That's something we're going to have to sit around and wait to figure out and really see what happens. But it is going to be interesting how this firing of Sessions plays out in relation to the Mueller investigation, especially since there are some reports where Mueller's ready to start delivering indictments. So now the other thing about that, though, is once that report is done, and other reports are saying that it is done, guess who he hands it off to? He hands it off to Whitaker. That is now Mueller's boss. So I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen about this. We're going to have to see about if this touches off a constitutional crisis. If it all comes down to what's actually in the report. And if it's as damning as some people think, well, then there could be a problem. Okay. Let's move on. All right. So we've had another mass shooting in America. It feels like I say that way, way too often because, well, it happens way too often. Now, this time it happened in California. This was a country music bar that was filled with college students. Now, 12 people were killed, including a police officer, according to authorities. Now, the gunman, who apparently committed suicide, stepped into the borderline bar and grill around 11:20 p.m. on Wednesday and began shooting at the patrons. Witnesses said one bar patron, Taylor Whitler, was talking to Fox News, and he said, quote, "He had perfect form. He looked like he knew what he was doing. He had practiced." Now that, of course, we find out later that this man was part of the military. He's a former Marine Corps officer. So, of course, he knew what he was doing. He was well trained. He was well trained by the government and had access, of course, to firearms. Now, Ventura County Sheriff Jeff Dean told a news conference that the suspect had been identified as Ian David Long, a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps. And, of course, Dean said the authorities so far right now have no indication of a motive or any connection to terrorism. He said that the victims right now were apparently targeted at random. So this guy apparently, from as far as we know, wasn't like outspoken in any political way. Now, look, we're going to go through social media as usual, and they're going to find out, they're going to try to piece everything together. So there's a lot that we don't know about Mr. Long, okay? We do know he wasn't a Muslim. He wasn't a black guy. He was another white guy who had a legal gun. So, now there was something illegal about that gun, and that was his magazine size. Apparently, he had an extended mag. So, which of course that allowed him to shoot to kill more people between having to reload magazines. So that, of course, is not legal, and somehow he was still able to get access to that. Now, as for Long himself, Dean said that his department did have several contacts with Long over the years for some minor incidents, including a traffic collision, okay, and in 2015 when he was beaten up at a local bar. And in April earlier this year, deputies were called to his house for a disturbance and found him acting irrationally. I'm not quite sure what that means, but they are saying that he might have been suffering from PTSD from the fact that he was a veteran that had been in the Corps. Now, of course, we don't give our soldiers the kind of mental health care that they need and that they deserve. So, and look, we don't give Americans, everybody else, the kind of health care and mental health care that we deserve as well. Maybe we ought to do something about that in case one of them becomes violent and actually does something like this. But again, I don't know his political affiliation. I don't know anything like that. So right now, you can't really call it an act of terrorism, but it certainly is terror. It certainly is a horrible situation. Okay. Nonetheless, right? Now, when he was suffering from PTSD, Dean said that they called our crisis intervention team, our mental health specialist who met with him, talked to him, and cleared him. So, now, among those killed in the assault were a police officer. This was 50-year-old Ron Halis, who was married and had a grown son. That was one of the people that were dead. We don't have identities on some of the others, but around a dozen or so people were also injured among the dead. Now, let's see, get into more information here. Man, from what I've been reading, it was a hectic escape for the people who did survive. In fact, there was one person quoted in this article. This is Matt Wennerstrom. Now, he's a 20-year-old college student who attended events at the bar. He said that shooter fired a short-barreled pistol that had a 10 to 15-round magazine. As I was mentioning earlier, it was an illegal extended magazine. He said that, look, when they started to reload, people, they got people out of the bar. Some smashed their way out through their windows using bar stools, breaking windows, going out into balconies. I mean, it was pandemonium. Okay. Now, there was a security guard. He was also shot outside, and there were security guards inside that I believe were also armed that were immediately the first one shot and killed. So much for having the good guy with the gun argument, right? Now, here's another thing that's not necessarily related, but sort of related. Last year, you guys remember, there was a country music festival in Las Vegas that was the scene of the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. That was the Las Vegas massacre that killed 58 people. Some of the people that were in this bar during this shooting survived that Las Vegas massacre. Isn't that amazing? Only in America can you go to two different events and get shot at within the span of a year. Survive two different mass shootings in two different places because you happen to be there, right? They're minding your own business, listening to music, and then another mass shooter. I mean, that's insanity. Here we have a country where where that can happen to you. Because mass shootings are so prevalent here in America. Does it seem like we've got a gun problem yet? Seems like it to me. And again, here we have, again, not a Muslim, not a Mexican from the caravan or anything like that. No, we have another apparently disturbed white guy. There seems to be a pattern here. And we need to do something about it. Whether it is, increased mental health care, which I've always been in favor of. And if you're actually in favor of, then why don't we actually do something about it? and increase mental health care and pass Medicare for all. Do something like that. But instead, you know their priorities, the people on the right who say, no, let's talk about mental health care and not talk about guns. There was somebody, NRA spokesperson. No, not an NRA spokesperson. I'm sorry. This is a Marsha Blackburn who recently won their election. She said the first thing when she was told about this, said, we need to protect the Second Amendment. That's what those people, that's their first concern. We got to protect the Second Amendment. We're not going to protect the people that are being negatively impacted by some people taking that amendment too far. Not going to protect those people. We're not going to protect them at all. We're going to worry about protecting the guns. And more importantly, I think to them is protecting their profits, protecting the gun manufacturers, because people like Blackburn receive tons of money from the NRA, who is, of course, funded by the gun lobby, by the gun manufacturers. We have a huge problem in this country, and a lot of it comes down to money and politics. So until we get a handle of that, we're going to see a lot more Thousand Oaks, Las Vegas massacres. This is the fifth mass shooting by a white guy within, the last 2 weeks? So it's obvious that there is a large problem, and unfortunately, we will again do nothing about it. All right. I'm going to take a break here. We'll come back and we'll give you more information on Matt Whitaker. Stay right here. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, got a super chat here from LL says, Nancy Pelosi needs to fling herself into a tar pit with the rest of the dinosaurs. And she's like 85 years old, or is that Dianne Feinstein? I know Feinstein's like in her 80s. Pelosi's got to be close, man. But you know what? It's not so much age that really matters. It's, and this is somebody who, you know, and the reason I say that is because, well, we'll look at Bernie Sanders, right? Bernie Sanders is a year older than Joe Biden, but there are people like, oh, he's too old to serve. Look at Dianne Feinstein. She'll be there until they drag her off in a coffin. So, at least until somebody successfully is able to primary her, that is. So, it's not like an ageist thing, but it's more like a she's out of touch thing. And Pelosi calls herself a superstar. She's not a superstar unless it comes to raising money from corporate donors. Then I guess, if you want to call yourself a superstar at sucking up money, then I guess. But I don't think that's good. That's not a good thing. So anyway, speaking of people who might be in old or in bad health, bad news today about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So apparently she had fallen in her office and fractured 3 of her ribs. So she's currently in the hospital. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, don't go. Don't die. Please don't die. Not in the era of Trump. Yeah, we kind of need her to avoid the worst of President Trump. We already have a stacked enough Supreme Court as it is. But imagine giving Donald Trump, he already had 2 Supreme Court justices. Imagine giving him 3. 3. Oh no. Oh no. That would be terrible. So, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for God's sakes, don't die. Right? I don't know what kind of weird kind of arcane ritual you could do to reverse your, to reverse your age and whatever pact you have to make with some supernatural demon or entity, whatever, to try to make sure that you don't die. Wrap her in freaking bubble wrap. I don't know. I don't care. As long as she survives till at least the end of the Trump administration. Because, man, we need her in place. Okay. I know I joke a little bit because she is like recovering, and I think so far what I hear is a good prognosis, but nonetheless, I get a little worried, right? Just a little worried. Okay. I already mentioned, by the way, I'm looking at some of the comments. I already talked a little bit about the Farron Cousins, Kyle, Jimmy thing. Just a little bit. And look, you guys already know. I talked about that before. And yeah. Let's get into the rest of the show, I think. I think that's the more prudent option. Okay. I just don't want to rehash. Let's move forward. Okay. We go into Mr. Whitaker. So yesterday, President Trump fired Jeff Sessions and replaced him with Sessions' former chief of staff. It's a man by the name of Matthew Whitaker. Now, Matthew Whitaker, of course, I'm going to explain who he is and why Donald Trump specifically chose him based on some of the stuff that he said before. But already you can see some issues with this, right? So now, Matthew Whitaker taking over as acting attorney general, well, he now has complete control over the Mueller investigation. So, obviously, before Rod Rosenstein, look, Rosenstein's the deputy attorney general, right? So, normally, in normal cases, he would be tapped to take over the acting role. But of course, Donald Trump does not like Rod Rosenstein because Rod Rosenstein has allowed the Mueller investigation to continue. So Trump personally intervened and chose Whitaker instead. Now, again, he is acting attorney general. He has not been confirmed, but he can at least act in that role. Now, here's the thing. Now, before the midterms, I remember doing a segment where I thought, okay, I think Rosenstein is going to be axed. So, I mean, it is a possibility, right? So, why would you replace Rod Rosenstein? Well, Rod Rosenstein was overseeing the Mueller investigation, and because Jeff Sessions had recused himself. So it kind of fell on him. So you get rid of Rod Rosenstein, and they tried, and they certainly wanted to, and then you could appoint someone as deputy attorney general to take over, and then you don't have to go and fire Jeff Sessions. After the midterms, Trump's like, fuck that idea. I'm just going to get rid of Sessions now. Who's going to stop me? Well, see, that's a good point, too. Now, Sessions, look, firing him was kind of a ballsy move. And that's got a lot of people very nervous. Not only that, but look, what's making people also nervous is the very reason Trump appointed Whitaker in the first place. Now, according to Vox, he aligns with both Trump and Sessions when it comes to issues like crime and immigration. So if you think Mr. Whitaker is going to be better than Jeff Sessions on those issues, you are absolutely wrong. So the issue of marijuana, for example, federally, possessing and using marijuana, that is still a Schedule I drug, which basically points out that it has absolutely no medicinal value and is incredibly dangerous. There is no use for it. Now, that's preposterous, but of course, that's the federal government designation. Now, is Whitaker going to change that? No. No, Whitaker is probably going to do the same things as Jeff Sessions on crime. But the very reason that Trump chose Whitaker instead of anybody else who also follows that same definition is how he feels about the Mueller investigation. In fact, he has criticized the investigation and has criticized Mueller himself. For example, Whitaker expressed skepticism about the Mueller probe before joining the Trump administration as Sessions' chief of staff in the fall of 2017. Now, he tweeted out, "Worth a read. Note to Trump's lawyer, do not cooperate with Mueller lynch mob." And there are more such tweets along that same vein. Now, and in August of 2017, he wrote an op-ed for CNN. He said, "Mueller has come up to a red line in the Russia 2016 election meddling investigation that he is dangerously close to crossing." Now, what is that line? Well, that line is the same line that President Trump has laid out. If you investigate my finances, that crosses a red line. I don't want you looking into my money. Well, why would Mueller want to look into your money? Oh, right. Because if you did end up working with the Russians, which is still a possibility, in order to try to have them influence the election on your behalf, then there would be a transfer of money. Or there could be some sort of money trail. So that would, obviously, you would want to, if you were Mueller or the investigators, you would look into that. That is within his purview because it is related to this, right? But Whitaker doesn't agree. He says, no, it's not related. In fact, he wrote that if he were to continue to investigate the Trump's financial relationships without a broadened scope in his appointment, then this would raise serious concerns that the special counsel investigation was a mere witch hunt. Not only that, but there was another CNN appearance in July of 2017 where Whitaker basically said, you want to get rid of Mueller? Here's how you can do it. Quote, "I could see a scenario where Jeff Sessions is replaced with a recess appointment and that Attorney General doesn't fire Mob Mueller, but just reduces his budget to so low that his investigation grinds to almost a halt." So, fire the Attorney General, right? Replace him with somebody else. Oh, again, the Attorney General will have to be confirmed by the Senate. Because right now, Whitaker is just the acting attorney general, and you have to appoint someone. Well, why do you think Trump just made this big move right after the midterm elections? Well, the Republicans picked up a few seats in the Senate. So, oh, look, Republicans now have a majority in the Senate that is fairly comfortable and will be able to do confirmations. Now, they'll be able to do judicial confirmations, and they'll also be able to do cabinet confirmations as well. So here Trump can put in, and he can also do recess appointments as well, can say, okay, hey, Whitaker, you've been doing such a great job as acting attorney general. I would like to have the Senate confirm you. And Republicans in the Senate will likely confirm him. I mean, look, here you had Lindsey Graham who said, oh, there will be hell to pay if you fire Sessions. Now saying, never mind. I'm not really worried about that now. Matt Whitaker, great pick. Fantastic pick. I'm on your side, Trump. Do you think he's going to get any pushback from Republicans? Of course not. So he could be put in as not just acting attorney general, but confirmed as attorney general. And he is a Trump loyalist who has said, we need to shut this thing down. And of course, he could shut it down without actually firing Robert Mueller, which would be, of course, I think everybody sees as a line too far. But if you slowly starve it of resources or revenue, and that doesn't get out into the news, well, then he might just get away with it. It's not an accident what's going on here, that the new guy in charge of the investigation wants to shut the investigation down. It's not an accident that this is happening. So, I don't know. I mean, look, he's also said that there is a legal way for President Trump to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and that it wouldn't constitute obstruction of justice. So, I don't know, man. All I know is if that he tries to do that, well, then we've lost our democracy. Now, there's a good chance maybe that since he has a bias, that he can't get confirmed as Attorney General, and that is possible, and I hope that that happens. But it also could be that while as acting Attorney General, he could shut the whole thing down before he gets replaced. Now, that is another possibility. So either way, if something like that happens, and the Republicans go along with it, which I'm assuming that they will, then I think we've lost our democracy. If there's no rule of law anymore, if there's nobody there to hold the president accountable, well then, or he can just shut people down when they try, well then, yeah, we've lost it. And then imagine what happens. I mean, when Trump realizes he's above the law, he's already declared war against the free press. Imagine what else he could do. The crisis is already here. Now, the question is whether our checks and balances, our institutions, and the Republicans and Democrats will get together to do the right thing that will allow us to withstand it. I do not have much faith. Okay. Moving on. Now, the Trump White House has begun spreading a fake video of CNN reporter Jim Acosta allegedly putting his hands on a White House intern during an argument in the White House press room. Now, this was during yesterday's briefing. Now, Trump and Acosta, of course, had a little bit of an argument when Acosta asked Trump about the caravan. Now, I want to show you a little bit of a video from that, and it also contains the alleged incident. So let's take a look.
But your campaign had an ad showing migrants climbing over walls and so on.
Well, that's true.
But
they weren't actors.
They're not going to be doing that.
They weren't actors. Well, no, it's true. Do you think they were actors? They weren't actors. They didn't come from Hollywood. Right. These were people. This was an actual, it happened a few days ago. And
They're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of
you know
miles
what?
away.
I
That's not
think
an
you
invasion.
should, honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings
Let
would
me
be
ask,
much better.
if I may
Okay,
ask
that's
one other
enough.
question, Mr. President, if I may ask
Peter,
one
go
other
ahead.
question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's
Mr.
enough.
President,
That's
I was going
enough.
to ask one of the other folks. have
That's
had-
enough.
Pardon me, ma'am.
So you see, having a little bit of an argument about the caravan, and then that young intern, she comes up to grab the mic. And that's when apparently Jim Acosta had karate chopped her. Now, I don't know if that looked like a karate chop to me. It looked like somebody who brushed up against somebody else while trying to protect the mic, because that same person was attempting to take the mic from them. That's what I saw, but apparently the White House saw something quite different. Now, I want to show you here the video tweeted out by White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders of the same incident, and she's tweeting it out in the context of now we're pulling. This is why we are pulling Jim Acosta's White House press credentials, because he accosted this poor young intern. Let's take a look at the video she tweeted out to justify that. All right. So it's slowed down. Oh my God. It's the karate chop. So that's the video that Huckabee Sanders tweeted out on that. And so, oh man, that looked very, very violent. Oh boy. You got to get Acosta out of there. He attacks women. No, that's not what happened. Now, here's the thing. That video that Sarah Huckabee Sanders had tweeted out actually came from another source. That source was Paul Joseph Watson. Now, if you're not familiar with the name, you might be familiar with who he works for. Alex Jones, and more specifically, InfoWars. So you have InfoWars videos being shared by Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Now, that I believe that is to punish Jim Acosta for actually asking questions. Now, I've got one more video I want to show you here. And this is from journalists and video editors who looked at this video, the one that Paul Joseph Watson tweeted out and Sarah Huckabee Sanders tweeted out, and they noticed something a little odd. They noticed that it was a bit sped up in certain parts. I want to show you their analysis of this video, and then we'll break it down. Let's watch.
That's
Mr.
enough.
President, I
That's
was going
enough.
to ask one of the other folks.
That's
have had-
enough.
Pardon me, ma'am.
That's enough. Ask one of the other folks. That's enough. Pardon me, ma'am. That's enough. That's enough. Ask one of the other folks. One of the other folks. Well, for the other folks. Well, for the other folks.
Okay, so what you can see is here you had a piece of that video that was sped up to make the karate chop appear to be a karate chop and more violent, other than him just putting his hand down there on her arm to kind of push it down a little bit as she is grabbing the mic. Also, the video that was doctored made it appear that he was going after her arm first, and not as in a response to her grabbing the mic from him. So that is clearly edited, that is clearly doctored to show something different than what actually happened. So there was no assault on that intern. It is literal fake news. And it is fake news being spread to go after and to justify kicking out someone like Jim Acosta, who occasionally challenges the administration. Now, CNN had a statement in response to this. They said that this was, quote, retaliation for his challenging questions. And on Wednesday, they accused Sarah Huckabee Sanders of lying about Acosta's actions. In fact, they said Sanders has provided fraudulent accusations and cited an incident that never happened. This unprecedented decision is a threat to our democracy, and the country deserves better. Jim Acosta has our full support. So Acosta has CNN's support. Now, I hope other journalistic outlets also go to support Jim Acosta on this. Because, again, this is clearly a doctored video. Now, there's more. And I got to give CNN credit for this one because they're actually being strong here and pushing back. Now, CNN tweeted, "They are not only dangerous, they are disturbingly un-American. While President Trump has made it clear he does not respect a free press, he has a sworn obligation to protect it. A free press is vital to democracy, and we stand behind Jim Acosta and his fellow journalists everywhere." And of course, you also had the White House Correspondents Association, who also released a statement on Wednesday saying that it strongly objects to the Trump administration's decision to use U.S. Secret Service credentials as a tool to punish a reporter with whom it has had a difficult relationship. They said revoking access to the White House is is a reaction out of line to the purported offense and is unacceptable. They also called on the White House to, quote, immediately reverse this weak and misguided action. Oh my God. Can you imagine? You don't even have to imagine. Here you have the press that is actually starting to be strong and actually attempt to hold the administration accountable. Sarah Huckabee Sanders going after her for spreading lies. They're actually calling them lies. Oh my God. Here we go. Finally. I actually love it when journalists tell the truth, when they actually call a lie out for a lie. And this is a clear lie. This is absolute bullshit. You guys saw the video. You guys saw the undoctored version, and you've seen the doctored version, and you saw a comparison between the two. It is very clear that this was orchestrated by the right wing, by the far right, by these conspiracy sites in order to protect President Trump from tough questions. Tough questions about the caravan, which, by the way, nobody's talking about anymore. Now that the midterm is over, nobody talks about the caravan. What? Caravan? No, I haven't heard no caravan. What are you talking about? No, we're going to talk about something else. And then also to distract from Russia, from him firing Jeff Sessions as well. All a distraction, right? And so this whole thing is basically sending a message to the rest of the media. Play ball or we will have your access revoked. And we will set it up to make it look like it's your fault. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Look, CNN, again, being incredibly strong. Acosta himself being incredibly strong, saying, "Yo, this did not happen. This is an absolute bullshit lie." Maybe he can further take it into libel. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but if I were him, I'd definitely look into it because that is an absolute lie. And it's sad. It's disgusting seeing this being spread by the White House press secretary, sharing this literal fake news. And this is probably one of the worst pieces of fake news. So, look, somebody's got to be punished for this. I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders, for sharing that, she has to step down. There's no other way. Look, she lies all the time, but this is actually worse. And so, God help us all if she doesn't. Okay, one more story. Now, Republican gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp, who is running in Georgia against Stacey Abrams, is attempting to run a little bit of a victory lap, despite the fact that no one has actually called the race. Now, he's doing so by resigning from his position as Georgia's Secretary of State. Now, why is that? Now, let me get into an article here first and give you some context. Kemp resigned as Georgia's Secretary of State a day after his campaign said he captured enough votes to become Georgia's governor. Now, Stacey Abrams is not conceding. She says, oh, hell no, I'm going to stay in and I'm going to fight. Now, the announcement came ahead of a scheduled hearing on Thursday for a lawsuit in which 5 Georgia voters had asked Kemp be barred from exercising his duties as the state chief's election officer in any future management of his own election tally. Now, in an interview with WSB Radio, Kemp said he and his campaign are declaring victory because it's just not possible for Abrams to pick up enough votes to force a December 4th runoff. Now, is that the truth? Not according to Abrams' campaign. Her campaign said that there's still enough unaccounted votes to force a runoff and that they need to pick up about 15,000 votes to do so. Kemp's reaction is kind of priceless. He's like, no, that's old math. Old math. He said in a radio interview that the number is actually more like 30,000, but he actually gives no specifics or details into why he considers that old math. Look, Abrams is really close. There is a possibility that some votes that are not counted, once they do, could push them into a runoff. Now, the Associated Press has not called the election so far, but here's some important details into why we need to count as many votes as possible. There was a lot of problems in this Georgia election, mainly voter suppression, right? So you had the exact match system that was in place here. Now, that system ran by Brian Kemp, by the way, who was in charge of that, held tens of thousands of ballots, suspended them because they didn't exactly match the names in the voter database, right? You also had voting machines in certain areas that didn't have power. These certain areas were African American areas, right? Places where there are a lot of minority voters. Isn't it funny how they delivered voting machines with no power cords to those certain areas? Or places where they didn't have enough voter cards? Weird how that worked out. Or maybe not. You also had Kemp. The entire idea that Kemp should have been allowed to keep his job managing the elections while he is running for election is insanity. He was able to do this while running for governor. You shouldn't be able to. And some states don't allow you to do that. They make you resign your office. Apparently, Georgia has no such rule. And they should. Because there is definite voter suppression and maybe even electoral fraud. I don't know. But here's the thing. The reason that I say that he's doing a victory lap, because he's resigning now instead of earlier, he already thinks, well, I stole it already. I won. I made sure to suppress the vote enough that I pulled out ahead, even though nobody's ever called the race yet. Now, Abrams, she is not conceding. She hasn't conceded. She's staying. She says she's going to stay to the very last ballot is counted. Because what it looks like right now is it's very, very close. Very close indeed. I mean, for example, there's a lot of provisional ballots that have yet to be counted from places where Abrams did very, very well. Now, not every vote is going to go to Abrams, but in areas where she does very well, why would those ballots not be for her? It is very possible that those could put her over the top. Possible. So that's why Abrams is staying in, of course. She's fighting to make sure that the Republicans do not steal this election. And so I hope I hope for the best. And look, that's what you need. You need to be strong. You need to stay until every single last vote is counted. And if you don't, the Republicans would be more than happy to steal it from you. Okay. So, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Thank you for making sure to like and share the stream. Thank you guys for the super chats as well. Check to see if there are any more. There are not. Thank you. Remember, sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That also helps us stay on the air. Very, very helpful in these trying times. So thank you all. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.